It is actually so frustrating being based in Australia and trying to make videos about gaming news because I can make a video at nighttime, my time, after work. Normal, right? Wrong, because by the time I schedule it and put it out there when you're all awake, new information or a new video or other news comes out that makes my video completely redundant or just old news. And it keeps happening, and it just happened again with Starfield. I'm sorry to those of you that saw my old video that I deleted within an hour. I apologize. I can't control when the news comes out, but regardless, we push on. There is new Starfield news out there right now. We're going to be talking about it. It's 6 a.m. I'm tired. I apologize for how shitty I look right now. But if you enjoy this video, if you appreciate me waking up early, like it. I'd appreciate it. Subscribe if you're new. My name is Alone Vault Wanderer. We have a new Starfield Constellation questions and answers video. If you haven't seen it, I'll include the link in the description below. It's not live on their YouTube channel. It's an unlisted link because they email it just out to Constellation members. You should sign up to be a Constellation member if you want to see this stuff first. So I'm going to cover all the main stuff that was talked about. Jess Finster, community director, spoke with Starfield's lead quest designer, Will Shen, on quests, something that we don't really know much about in Starfield. So this is really, really good, juicy information. And Will Shen, mind you, is actually responsible for the main quest line in Starfield. So you want to listen to what this man has to say. He talked about 5 broad topics in particular based on questions from the community, right? Random encounters, Earth solar system, faction quest lines, companions, and NPCs, all right? So this is great stuff. We're going to be covering all the main points in this video, starting off with random encounters. So he was essentially just generally asked, Will, how does random encounters work in Starfield? Is it like Skyrim? Is it like Fallout, et cetera, et cetera? And he talked again about this new tech that they've built. So of course, they've built new tech to create all the 1,000 plus planets in Starfield. And as part of that, this new tech can also take whole locations that they've built and just place them onto planets, right? And that's how it's going to work when it comes to random encounters. So instead of just like in Skyrim, for instance, you're just walking along and a courier hands you a random letter or a note, and that's how a random encounter occurs. Or even in Fallout, you just walk by and you see a group of people, like, oh, cool, that's a cool random encounter. Now you can like walk by a whole outpost and see a whole group of people there that have a problem, right? They say one of our members was kidnapped, and then some pirates are responsible, so you got to go find the pirates, and they're over there, and then they can literally go to another new location where they've placed a bunch of enemies and the person needing to be saved. So the way they described it, TLDR, is like a dynamically placed settlement system and a dynamically placed dungeons on planets. So that's cool. It does flesh out, like, again, what we've been told about their new tech and how they're creating planets. This is specifically, don't be worried in terms of like, is this how quest lines are going to work? This was specifically about random encounters and how random encounters will work, right? So you could literally go by one planet, from the sound of things, you could go by an area on a planet, see nothing, and then if you were going by there another day and it happens to be a random encounter, oh, there's suddenly a big group of people there, right? So that's how it sounds like it's gonna work. And then Jess also asked in response, or confirmed in response, essentially at any point in time on any planet, you can experience a random encounter anywhere. So hopefully they have a bunch of really cool random encounters that you could do some awesome stuff. Sounds really cool, and hopefully kind of like adds a bit of intrigue maybe to some of those planets that feel a bit empty or might just be for resource farming at first glance. But then there's these really cool random encounters that you can only encounter a very small percentage of the time. So it sounds cool. I like the sound of that. And next he talks about Earth's solar system. So the question was asked, it seems like Earth's solar system, our solar system, is going to be appearing in the game. We saw some hints of that in the gameplay reveal, I believe, or one of the trailers. And Will said yes, it is very early on in the main quest, but we do actually visit our solar system, Earth's solar system. It's actually called the Old Neighborhood, which is pretty cool in-game, in the lore of the game. And you're sent there by Constellation on a mission to discover the mysteries of the artifacts. And you'll get in contact with the question of essentially what happened to Earth. And then you'll find out that people that used to live on Earth, they moved to Mars, and there is a settlement on Mars. And it's one of the earliest settlements that humanity created once they left Earth. It's called Cydonia, and there's a whole city there with its own problems and people in it. So it really does seem to be like mirroring real life. If you read into science and read into the research and what they say about how eventually Earth is going to die because the sun's going to expand and explode or just do a supernova, and it's possible that Mars is going to be the only habitable planet even at that stage. It's possible Mars gets encapsulated as well, but maybe not. So it could be similar to that. Maybe something happens with the sun, it explodes, or it expands to a stage that Mars is the only habitable place. This is actually based on real science. If you look into it, the sun might get to a stage where Mars becomes like really nice to live on. Very, very cool. I like how they're actually bringing real life science into this game. Todd has talked about that a little bit in the past. I don't think they're going to go too crazy with it where it makes the game not fun. Again, he mentioned about refueling and fueling your ship. Like, is it fun for you to actually run out of fuel and be on a planet and have to call someone for help? Probably not. It breaks the game. But in things like this, when it comes to like, well, why are people living on Mars now? They could actually use real life parallels like that in our real world to tell a story in the game. So I really like that. I really like that we get to go to Mars and there's a settlement on there. Hopefully it's big and there's a bunch of stuff to do there. And it's just going to be weird, right? If we can actually, and it seems like we can visit Earth, what is our planet going to look like? And the whole thing about artifacts, I'm very excited to see how that progresses as well, as that being part of the main quest. We don't know much more beyond that, but that sounds really cool. And then he talked about faction quest lines, and this got me really interested. So essentially, Jess asked the question, how are faction quest lines going to work? Is it going to be like you can do all faction quest lines, like in some games, some BGS games, or you can only do certain ones, like in Fallout New Vegas, for instance? You're kind of restricted at one point in the game in terms of which factions you follow, and then that's how that game ends, essentially. But Will said the main quest essentially gives you a tour of the settled systems and all the major players, so you get a bit of a taste as to what they're all up to. I really, really do like that. He says that they made sure you can play through all faction lines independently of each other as well. He did talk about it at one stage. They asked the question, should we make these factions conflict with each other? How is that going to affect your playthrough of another faction's quest line later in the game if you decide to delay it, stuff like that? And that obviously would have gotten a little bit complicated. I know some games have done it, they've done it brilliantly, but I like the idea of just being able to play through all the faction quest lines as independently as possible. I'm sure there's going to be some references and Easter eggs, talking about each different faction as you play a particular faction's quest line. But I like that you can just kind of do them all at your own pace. You can come to one later, do one straight away, and it's all going to allow you to play through. You're not going to miss anything, essentially. That's the sense that I'm getting as Will is talking about how the faction quest lines are going to work in the game. So that's very cool. And he also says that the stories are more personal. You're actually influencing the direction of where these factions are going to go. He uses as an example the Freestar Rangers, saying, what's more important to them, justice or industry? Where are you going to nudge them? So we are going to be able to have an influence on these factions, what they do, where they actually head up. And he did say that you're not necessarily going to end up as the head of every single faction. He didn't say that that's never going to happen. Like it might actually be a possibility that you end up leading up a faction by the end of the game, but that's not going to happen with every single faction. Sometimes you're just a player and you can influence key decisions, so that's cool. But he also said that the major factions, or the major characters, in every faction quest line will reflect on your choices, which can have far-reaching consequences for that faction and what it cares about. So this is something that we constantly want from BGS games. We want for these kinds of games. We want, choices, consequences, like stuff we do. We want to actually affect the world in a big way. And it seems like the way they're doing this in this game is that it's really going to affect how these factions operate. I like that. If I don't like a particular faction, for instance, I want to be able to influence them to do dumb stuff, and then they fall apart in the end. Like, I want things like that. I want to actually have wide-ranging consequences, because when you want to do like repeating playthroughs of this game, you want to be able to do different stuff, right? You want to be able to say, oh, well, what happens now if I tell this faction to do this? How do they end up? How does that affect the story? How does that affect the world? So that, I'm just so excited. So that sounds really cool. Let's talk about companions. So essentially the question that was asked was, how are companions going to work? Will says, along the main storyline, companions will have a lot of opinions and points of view about what decisions you should be making in the storyline. And there are also occasions where you can ask companions to speak for you. So you could be like challenged and you want to get past a certain door or a certain area, and someone tells you can't, you can actually turn to your companion and ask them to handle that for you on your behalf. And there can be consequences, good or bad, depending upon what they say. So you don't actually know how your companions are going to react in a particular circumstance. I really like that. I think it's cool. It leaves a lot of intrigue, stuff up for chance, depending upon which companion that you actually have. Obviously, at this stage, we only know about Vasco. I feel like Vasco is going to be a bit more of a neutral mediator in the game. He just kind of gets that sense. But there could be some like evil companions or more evil companions, like in past games, especially Fallout, Jericho, Fallout 3, etc., which actually say dumb shit and would make you like not be able to progress or make you have to fight enemies, stuff like that. I would really like that. It'll spice the game up, make it a bit more fun again on multiple playthroughs, make it different, different each time. And they also say that, of course, like companions do the normal stuff. So if they follow you into danger, you can trade equipment with them, so we can use them as mules, which is great. And they are also crewing your ship and helping out. The way that it sounds like, kind of like, other space games in the past, where you have your crew on your ship, a bunch of different companions on it, and hopefully you can take one to like different quests, maybe even depending upon what you're doing. So maybe, and this is just me speculating, if you needed someone that was a bit more of an arbitrator that you can get through certain areas relatively unharmed, you take Vasco the robot as an example. But if you just want to kill shit, you take someone that's a little bit more akin to that. So I think that sounds cool. I like that they stay on your ship and they help you with the ship. I do wonder how that's going to be fleshed out as well. Like, do they refuel your ship? Do they repair it for you? Can they help you kind of build it out and fit it out? I'm interested to see how that works. And then finally, they talk about NPCs, or he talks about NPCs. And they just asked, how an NPC is going to work. Will says, all quest lines have major characters which reflect on the decisions you're making, and they will have opinions on whether their decisions that you're making are good or bad. For a few of the storylines as well, and the main quest, you will actually be determining the fate of certain NPCs. So whether they live or die, whether they're still in or out of a faction, etc. So we're going to be meeting NPCs, of course. We're going to actually have, again, this is the whole thing about influence in the game, making decisions, having choices, and seeing actual consequences. It's going to be great that we can see that when it comes to the main characters in the game. Like, again, if we find someone that we don't like, I want to do or say something that kills that dude and see how that affects the rest of the game. See how that affects the faction that they might have been in. Or even just like, if you remember games like Dishonored, you could like, sabotage certain heads of factions, and then they would like leave. They wouldn't die necessarily, but they would be discredited and then they'll be kicked out. I want that kind of stuff in Starfield as well. It shouldn't just all be about killing. I would love to be able to sabotage certain people if I don't like them, and now they're humiliated and then they can't take up the faction, and maybe I become the leader of the faction. I don't know. I'm just speculating. But this is literally, even though it was a 5-minute video only, we actually got a decent bit of news on Starfield's quests and all that kind of stuff and how it's going to work. So let me know in the comments below what you think. A lot of it is still vague. Do I still think that we need more information about Starfield? Yes, absolutely we do. But at the very least, we got that. At the very least, they did release it soon after the Video Game Awards. So I have to say, Bethesda, kudos. Thank you for doing this. Would have still liked to have seen something at the Video Game Awards. This video definitely wasn't the right format for that, so I'm glad that they saved this. Some people have been asking the question, though, why are they releasing these videos unlisted? Like, why is it just not available on their YouTube channel? It's because they want you to become a Constellation member. Those memberships are so crucial because there's another form of advertising, there's another form of communication, and like getting, all your details involved, etc. It's useful to them, okay? Essentially, it's a good way for them to gauge interest in the game in terms of how many people actually sign up. And then once they have that list of emails, they can do a bunch of shit with it. So yeah, that's why they're doing it. Like, I understand it, but if you want the full video, linked in the description below. Let me know your thoughts. I know this has been rushed, but it's like, I have to work this morning, okay? This has been the Lone Vault Wanderer. Please take care of yourself, and would you kindly keep fighting the good fight. I just spat everywhere. What the hell?